Alright guys, so as I go over this PowerPoint, you need to be filling in this graphic organizer that you got in class on Monday. It is due at the beginning of class Wednesday. Please remind your friends to get it done. It's going to be a big homework grade, double the normal points. And we're doing this because the graphic organizer is a great way to organize your thoughts in a way that's very easy to study. By the end of the year, y'all will be making your own graphic organizers, but this time around, I want to go through it with you. Alright, so just some vocab review. A monomer is a building block, so think of a Lego piece. A polymer is made up of repeating units, or made up of a bunch of monomers stuck together. Easy way to remember that is mono means one, and poly means many. So if you have many monomers stuck together, if you have many building blocks, then you'll have a polymer. A lot of the biomolecules we're talking about are actually polymers made up of monomers. So just to review again, a biomolecule is one of the 4 molecules found in all living things. Bio means life, easy way to remember that. A biomolecule is also sometimes referred to as a macromolecule. So if I use the word macromolecule, just know I'm talking about a biomolecule. And a quick review, the 4 biomolecules are carbohydrates, give us energy, lipids, they store energy, and they insulate us. Proteins, they do all the work in our cells. They help us grow. And 4 nucleic acids, so that's DNA and RNA. So we're going to start talking about carbohydrates. Look in your graphic organizer on the front. Make sure you're filling in as we go. Carbohydrates are carbs. So they're found in sugars and starches. So a lot of fruits, also candy obviously has sugar in it, and then pasta, corn, bread, most fruits and vegetables. Some specific examples are fructose, glucose. When you hear about a high blood sugar level, you're actually talking about a high blood glucose level. That means there's a lot of sugar in your blood or a lot of glucose in your blood. Starch is in plants, so we talk about starchy foods, that's a carbohydrate. Glycogen stores up energy in animal muscles, and cellulose makes up plant cell walls. So those are the most important carbohydrates. All right, make sure you were filling in these 2 categories in your graphic organizer. Now we're moving on to these sections to the right. So the elements in carbs are C for carbon, H for hydrogen, O for oxygen. Remember that by thinking CHO, C-H-O. The monomer that makes up carbohydrates is a monosaccharide. And you can see right here, sorry, I'm getting used to this app, is a picture of a monosaccharide. It's circular shaped or ring shaped. So if you are taking a test and you see anything that is ring shaped, it might look like a stop sign, a pentagon, or a hexagon, you know it's probably a carbohydrate. And remember we talked about in class, the ratio of carbon to hydrogen to oxygen is 1 to 2 to 1. That just means there are twice as many hydrogens as there are the other elements. So if you were to count it out, you'd see in this example that there's twice as many H's as there are C's or O's. And the function, or what carbohydrates do. They are the major source of energy for cells. We talk about energy with lipids too, but the energy that we use on a day-to-day basis comes from our carbs. And they make up the structure in plants. So think cellulose is that example that makes up plants. So just to review, mono means 1, di means 2, and poly means many. So an easy way to remember, monosaccharide, you're just going to have 1 ring. Disaccharide, it's 2 of those monosaccharides bonded together. Now we have 2 rings. Di means 2. And poly means many. So in this example, this example, there are many monosaccharides bonded together to make a polysaccharide. So that explains why monosaccharide is a monomer. This is the building block. When we put a bunch of these building blocks, these monomers together, we get our polymer, or our full carbohydrate chain. All right, now we are moving on to lipids. Make sure you're looking at this bottom part of your graphic organizer on that front page. So lipids, think about unhealthy foods. It's found in food sources such as butter, olive oil, and grease. Anything fatty is going to have lipids in it. Most foods have some lipid content, and you can look at the back of the nutritional information to see how much. Obviously, some lipids are better than others. Like olive oil is a lot healthier than butter. Any type of fat, oil, or wax is a lipid, and also our cell membrane is made up of lipids. We'll talk about that more when we talk about cells. All right, moving on to lipids on our graphic organizer. Just like carbohydrates, it contains the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, or CHO, CHO. Now, lipids are a little bit different. They aren't actually made up of the same repeating units over and over again, the way carbohydrates are. They're not really made up of a true monomer, a true building block. It is made up of a glycerol and fatty acid chains. So just know if it's not ring-shaped, if it looks like a glycerol and then a bunch of chains of carbons and hydrogens, it's probably a lipid. And the major function of lipids include energy storage. Remember, that's different than carbs. Carbs are the major source of energy we use every day. Lipids store up energy long term for use later. It also makes up our membranes. And they provide insulation or warmth. For example, polar bears. They have a big lipid layer that keeps them warm. Same thing in whales. They have a layer of blubber that keeps them warm, that insulates them. All right, now flip on to the back. We're moving on to proteins. So proteins, when you think about people trying to beef up, get fit, get buff, they eat a lot of proteins. They might even put protein powder in their food or in their drinks. So it's found in meat, eggs, fish, beans, also nuts. Peanuts are a great source of protein. And some examples include collagen, keratin, antibodies, and catalase. So these are a lot of crazy words. We're going to talk about them throughout the year. So if you've never heard of them before, that's okay. Just know they're examples of proteins. Keratin, this example right here, is in our hair. So sometimes you might see in hair products like shampoos and conditioners that say, strengthens keratin or keratin treatment for your hair. It's supposed to make your hair super strong and shiny. So moving on to the rest of your graphic organizer. We have still carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen as our elements and proteins, but we also have N. We have nitrogen. So think CHON for proteins. The monomers, or the building blocks that make up proteins, are called amino acids. And this is what an amino acid looks like. So all amino acids have an amino group. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my arrow. Amino group, a side chain, and a carboxylic acid group. And they form structures such as muscles, hair, nails, and other animals also mix up their horns or their hooves. Proteins are also enzymes, which help speed up chemical reactions. Like the reactions in our stomach that break down food, enzymes help speed those up a lot so that we can digest our food very quickly. And proteins help protect our body from disease. Antibodies are a type of protein that specifically do that. And proteins help transport materials. So basically, when you think of proteins, they do all the work in our bodies. They protect us, they help us grow and develop. We could not live without proteins. They're the major workhorse of our body. So back to our word monomer. Remember, that means building block. And polymer, which is when you have a long chain of monomers bonded together. When we're talking about proteins, our monomer is an amino acid. Our polymer here shows 1, 2, 3, 4 different monomers, different amino acids bonded together. That makes up a protein. The bonds that hold all these different amino acids together are called peptide bonds. That's why proteins are also sometimes called polypeptides. Polypeptides, many peptides. If you have many peptide bonds holding amino acids together, then you're going to have a full protein. So make sure off to the side in your graphic organizer somewhere, you write the word polypeptide so you know that a protein and a polypeptide are the same thing. And lastly, nucleic acids. You're at the very bottom part of your graphic organizer. So nucleic acids are found in anything that comes from a living thing. So nuts, fruits, veggies, meat, eggs, fish. Any example that we can think of that came from a living thing has some type of DNA or RNA in it. So those are the two types of nucleic acids. So if you look at this picture of DNA and RNA, you can tell the major difference is DNA is double-stranded. One strand here and another strand here. Sorry. And this air is tough. RNA is just single-stranded. That's the major difference. But they're made up of the same monomers. They're made up of the same building blocks. So both DNA and RNA are types of nucleic acids. And we hear about DNA more, but they are both super important. So, nucleic acids contain the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So this is our last biomolecule that contains a new element, phosphorus. So think chomp, chomp, C-H-O-N-P. Nucleic acids are made up of nucleotides. So the monomer of a nucleic acid is a nucleotide. If you have a bunch of nucleotides bonded together, then you will have a full nucleic acid, a full DNA or RNA. If we look at our picture right here, we show nucleic acid and we have labeled the parts. Make sure in your picture on your graphic organizer you can clearly label the parts. You will need to know on the test that a nucleotide is made up of 3 parts, and that's the phosphate group, the sugar, and the nitrogenous base. You also need to remember that nucleic acids store genetic information for cells' activities. So when you think of DNA and you think of genes, you're exactly right. That's what DNA does. That's what nucleic acids do. That's why they're so important. DNA also controls protein synthesis, or how we build proteins in our cells. So without nucleic acids, without DNA, we couldn't have protein. That's why nucleic acids are often considered like the brain of our cells, because they control so much information. So just to review, if you look at this picture here of a nucleotide, it's pretty complex. It shows all the elements, all the P's, O's, C's, H's. But in a lot of models, scientists just make things simpler for themselves. This is how they draw a nucleotide. So you have this picture in your notes. It's a lot simpler just to draw it this way with shapes instead of writing out all the elements. So if you see this picture, you know it's a nucleotide. If you see this picture, you also know it's a nucleotide. And this picture very clearly shows how if you have a bunch of nucleotides bonded together, it makes up a whole chain of DNA. That's why nucleotide is a type of monomer or a building block, and DNA is a type of polymer or a bunch of monomers bonded together. So just to review, the 4 biomolecules are carbohydrates or carbs, lipids, which are fats, proteins, and nucleic acids, which are DNA and RNA. Thank you for watching the video, guys. Make sure you bring this worksheet completed to class on Wednesday. Have a great day.